of fact. Independent fact-checking and corrections are encouraged.
Can we get a cup of coffee in here, please?
Damn good coffee and hot.
Wake up, America. You've got a dog that needs walking. That's right, sunshine. Just put on a big pot of strong coffee and get ready to type your little hate mail with your opinions about kumbaya and flat earth insanity. Stand-up comedy? You want stand-up comedy? Well, we've got sit-down comedy. It's time for Coffee with the Dog. You make me laugh.
I'm not going to make you laugh. Not today, not any day. I'm not here to amuse you. All right, I'll do my best. Oh, the band is rocking out today. God. I'm gonna have to call a cop on these guys. All right, quiet now, fellas. Oh, you don't think it's you. There they go. Oh, good morning, folks. It is what is it? It's Thursday. It's Thursday, July 13th. 2023, a beautiful day to be alive. Hope it's a beautiful day wherever you are. I think I got a good one for you today. Laura Banks will be with us in the first hour. Laura has a new memoir out, and if you don't know about her, she's a comedian, actress, and author, and I believe astrologer too, in some respects. I don't know. What do I know? I'm so culturally unhip. And in the second hour, Jason Rowland from World Series of Comedy will be with us. So good show for you today. I'm looking, if you see me distracted here, I'm looking on my other screen. Last night, Matt Holton was the guest on the evening program, and Matt has written a book about moneyless society, which is a weird concept. And basically, the big holdup there, and the question that none of these guys, I've talked to several guys about sustainability and moving forward on the planet, and people who are convinced that they have the solution to long-term sustainability of the human race on planet Earth, and none of them can answer the big question when it comes to wealth inequality and that kind of stuff, or moving to a moneyless system, meaning no money, no currency. How do you get the people who have the money to give it up? How do you get Elon Musk to say, you know what, that 240 billion you've got in the bank or wherever you got it, and forget about it. It's not yours anymore. You just give it up, right, for the good of mankind. You think he's going to go along with that? And not just Musk, but all of them. How do you get all those very wealthy people, just because wealth is power and it's addictive? And we were talking about this a little bit yesterday with Robert, how once you get a taste of being rich, it's just never enough, and people just want more, 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 more. And that, how do you reverse that? And he had no answers for that, and none of the guys who've written about that subject do. But one of the things he was talking about, he hates capitalism, and I was bringing up that I think consumerism, no matter what the economic model is, I think consumerism is the devil. It's not necessarily capitalism. It's not communism. It's not socialism. It's consumerism, the need for more stuff. But we're talking about communist countries where really it is capitalism, state-sponsored capitalism. In other words, the people at the top are still capitalists. It's the one class that's below that is all like in the slave conditions of the state that are servants to communism. And we're talking about China. And I remembered yesterday morning, my Facebook memories, and I'm still looking over here. If you see, and people on the radio don't, you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But I'm a little distracted looking for a photo that came up in my memories yesterday on Facebook. Now I can't retrieve it today because it's not my memories anymore. So I have to go back through 10 years of photos on Facebook, and it takes forever. But 10 years ago yesterday, my wife was getting a teaching certificate in New York City. She doesn't drive, so I drove her to New York City, but I had nothing to do during the day. Go to Union Square Park to pass the time, and there are these Chinese women. And again, people on the radio don't know what I'm doing here. Basically, these Chinese women were standing like this. I can't see what I'm doing for about 10 hours while I sat in the park. Nobody questioned them. Oh, I'm curious. I want to know what the hell's going on there with and for the people on the radio, I'm just holding my hands over my head like in a oh what a beautiful morning. Oh what a beautiful day pose. And nobody seemed curious about it. Oh, is it my Jordan Peterson voice coming back? And I was curious about it. So I went over and asked them. I'll leave it, the people in the chat room today. I just want you to guess what that's all about. People they're standing in the park with their hands over their heads, and I wish I could find the image because I took a picture of them. And you would probably never guess what that was all about. And maybe I'll just wait to reveal that. Anyway, we do have a full day for you. I'm going to get to the sponsors piece right now, and when we get back. Oh, I think I'm getting closer. To finding the image. Some weird stuff in my old photos, folks. Man, I'm a demented person. When I get back after the commercial, we're going to meet Laura Banks and find out about her book, The Wrath of Blonde. Today's show is brought to you by Koa Coffee and the Chinese ladies in Union Square Park, who were doing strange things that I want to let you know about. Anyway, as I mentioned, today's show is brought to you by Koa Coffee. It's the best coffee in the world, according to, it's one of the top 10 in the world, according to Forbes magazine. It's the best in the United States of America. It's my favorite coffee. It's the coffee I'm drinking. Get yourself some Koa Coffee, and we'll be back in just 1 minute. This episode is brought to you by Koa Coffee. If you are a coffee connoisseur and want to experience the best coffee Hawaii has to offer, no blends, no compromise, try the true taste of aloha. Koa Coffee produces premium Hawaiian coffee, hand-picked, expertly roasted, and delivered from Hawaii to your door with aloha. From award-winning 100% Kona coffee grown on the slopes of the Mauna Loa volcano to the unique mocha beans of Maui, they strive to provide their loyal customers with the best quality and freshness. Since 1997, Koa Coffee has been known far and wide as a product of utmost quality, and their awards prove it. Koa Coffee was featured in Forbes' Top 10 Coffees of the World. This is the coffee Forbes called the best coffee in America. Find out what it's all about. Go to minddogtv.com/coffee. minddogtv.com/coffee. Get yourself some good Koa coffee, and you could probably, I don't know, maybe meet a young girl running on the beach. Turn around, hello, hi, nice smile. Because she's got Koa coffee. She's running for the Koa coffee is what's happening. Tomorrow, just a programming note, tomorrow, Mike Binder from the Comedy Store, documentary director, comedian, and proprietor of Stand Up World will be with us in hour one. And in hour two, Eddie Brill, comedian who will be performing at Sticks and Stones next Tuesday. I will be there, and we'll probably be giving away a couple of tickets to that tomorrow. Sticks and Stones is a new comedy club here on Long Island, Southampton, New York. I blew past this picture. It's got to be in my memory somewhere. Anyway, tomorrow that should be a good show for you today. But today, We have a good show for you. As I mentioned, right now in hour one, Laura Banks is going to be with us in just a moment. Her new memoir, The Wrath of Blonde, is a true life story about an adventurous girl who leaves her home in Kansas for California in search of fame, fortune, and frolic, and finds all three. The compelling book takes the reader through Laura's life from surviving a dysfunctional childhood, like there's such thing as a functional childhood, to working with some of the biggest names in Hollywood. It chases her early years as an actress, including landing a small but pivotal role in Star Trek II, and how Whoopi Goldberg came into her life, her romantic encounter with William Shatner. That's got to be crazy. And finding success as an author, comedian, and actress. Ladies and gentlemen, please open your ears, open your minds, and help me welcome Laura Banks to Coffee with the Dog. Laura, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm wanting to be on the beach with that girl and just running for coffee, but
Are
I'm
you
here.
are you in California now?
I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, and I'm not sure
Okay.
why, but I'm
All
here.
right. I just was. I didn't want to have you getting up at 6:15 to be on the show in the morning.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
So you're not in Kansas anymore. Growing up in Kansas, gotta be a kind of Dorothy kind of existence. We are
It
not
was
in Kansas anymore.
Yes, it was really not me from the get-go. My mother was from New York City. She actually worked at the Paramount Theater as an usherette and loved New York City, and then met my dad, and then they moved to the Midwest, and she hated every minute of it, and basically told me as a child over and over again, you don't have to get married, you don't have to make babies, and definitely get out of Kansas. So my whole life was about getting out of Kansas. I'm not sure where I'm looking. As soon as I possibly could, and so I did as soon as I possibly could, because yeah, it's flat. People are somewhat narrow-minded. Kansas City's lovely. It's got fountains, but no, I wanted to get to Hollywood and make a mess of things, which I did.
Okay, well, I think everybody in America does. And especially now, it seems like everybody wants to be famous in some way.
Yeah.
Was comedy your aspiration when you were young, or was it film acting? What drove you to Hollywood? What got you there?
Um, my car. No. So, by the way, Eddie Brill's a buddy of mine. I love that you're going to have Eddie. I love Eddie. He's in my book. So my mother was pretty miserable. She had all kinds of, pill popping going on, and I would go get alcohol for her at the local alcohol place. And one day I dressed up as a Native American Indian and walked into her bedroom and said, "You want to trade?" And I was like, I had beads. And however I did it, whatever, she laughed hysterically. And I literally could track the moment where, oh my gosh, making her laugh was really important and cool and fabulous. So true to any decent comic, I my roots suck, and it was about making somebody else laugh. And then high school, the plays, and college, and then comedy. When I moved to California, I got there in 1979. I bumped into Whoopi Goldberg, and we formed an improv comedy troupe, Spontaneous Combustion. And then I walked into the La Jolla Comedy Store, and I felt I had entered the heaven of all heavens, and never looked back. The sacred church of comedy. And so then it was the San Diego Comedy Store, and then I bombed horribly trying to do stand up there, and quit for 10 years, and came back, and then passed at the Comedy Cellar and the Improvisation in New York after 3 years of creating a decent, what I would consider middle act. But the LA Comedy Store is featured quite a bit in my book because of my adoration of comics and comedy. And Andy Kaufman wanted to wrestle me. I mean, crazy stories.
Wow, that's cool. That's enough for me. That would be a full life for me. Just Andy one.
Yeah, I mean, and Robin Williams this is all in my book, The Wrath of Blonde. But Robin Williams is, yeah, go do it, let him wrestle you. And then they threw I noticed they're doing a documentary on his life coming out soon. So I actually wrote the producers. I said, hey, I almost wrestled him, until they threw a contract in my hand that said, well, if you really get severely injured, too bad. We aren't going to be responsible. And I'm like, I didn't really want to do it. I didn't really get the whole part of Andy, but I used to waitress at a comedy club called the Horn Nightclub in West LA, where he would come in as Tony Clifton. And for the longest time, I didn't know it was Andy. So some history there. But
I'm just curious now. Was it always Andy, or was it even then? Was it sometimes Bob Zamuda? Because there were times when it was, and sometimes it wasn't.
Interesting. Good question. I don't know.
That's
Don't know.
very cool. But now you just skimmed over like it was. I bumped into Goldberg. You said like you're walking down the street and literally bumped into her. Was she already famous by the time you met her?
No, 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 no. I'm a little older now, and this was 1979, and Whoopi was on food stamps and working to just get by, and we would do improv at this theater in San Diego and go backstage and sit on egg crate, cart crates and talk and shoot the bull. And she was just getting started, but working with her in an improv comedy environment was insane because clearly I could only step back and hand her, well, at that time she had a prop box. And so she would use different things. And she was already formulating all these amazing characters. And then years later, I would go to her Broadway show she brought me to, and she told me that I was the first famous person she knew when she went to Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan and saw me on stage, on the screen. I mean, her daughter said, Mommy, isn't that girl from your improv group? And I take credit for Whoopi going on to get into the Star Trek, series, but may
That's
not be
cool. That's so
responsible for
cool.
that,
Um,
but yeah.
I did now. Well, I don't want to get all that serious here, but I had somebody on about a month ago. We were talking about commerce and art, and he was talking about making it pay and all that kind of stuff. And we're talking about talent and how many talented people are out there, but it feels like some people are destined to become stars. I mean, like and I don't, get all spiritual about it, but like the hand of God put a finger on them and said, "You are a chosen one. You're going to be famous. So no matter what happens in your life, you are destined to be famous." Do you have any take on why some people just are destined, it seems, to have the light shine on them, even though, because
Yeah.
as I mentioned, there are a billion really talented people who don't get that. They just struggle in anonymity, but there are certain people who just no matter what, they are destined to they seem destined to become stars in our minds, and celebrities. Do you have any?
Well, anonymity, easy for you to say. But here's the thing. I go into this quite a bit in The Wrath of Blonde, The Making of Star Trek II. William Shatner taught me to plug. I am fascinated by celebrity. As a child, Andy Kaufman would call it Dutyville, right? Where you're going to get inside the TV set and you're going to be in Dutyville, or, Forrest Gump reality crazy for me. And I sat with Jack Nicholson and gotten high, and Warren Beatty was there, and and it's in my book, they're both trying to like take me home and have a three-way, and I thought I would die. So I said, no. I really just wanted Warren, but then Jack pursued me, and William Shatner, I was with, it's in my book. It's a combination of incredible amount of talent, incredible amount of charisma, right place, right time, and a ridiculous amount of talent. Now you can have some of that, all of that, a little of that, but most of it really resides in also having just the nepotism and the opportunity through just who you know. So if you don't have that, then you really have to be wicked, gorgeous, handsome, and really pretty friggin' talented and ambitious. So if you've got all that going, then as an astrologer, I certainly do believe in destiny. I certainly believe that we are fated in many directions in our lives to live in a specific way on a specific track with choices kind of like go right, go left. But yeah, we're all kind of destined. And these guys were born with, and gals, the star of celebrity that, look, I can tell you where Jupiter is going to be in the sky in the year 2030 to the degree. But we're random? No, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
That's pretty. That's a good point. In the book, because you're mentioning all these people, and I'm wondering,
Yes.
is there anything that people might get? Some of these celebrities might take umbrage with you putting in a book, like stuff that happened in their past, and be like, I wish you wouldn't make that public.
Well, I certainly hope so. No. The biggest reveal is that I shagged William Shatner. I mean, really, like, she's written a book about, anybody can write a book, about shagging somebody. But I really actually love the guy. He's amazing. I mean, look at him, 91, 92, going to the moon. I do reveal that we were physical for about 4 months, and he was, sort of married at the time. But,
Oh,
the point is we need more energy like him in the world to be so lit up and so creative. He writes poetry. He does music. He's won, the TV award. What is that? The Emmy. Endless energy. Still goes to the conventions. And we celebrate his promiscuity, or he's Captain Kirk. So in Star Trek, he was this rigorously promiscuous male dude. Where's the female Captain Kirk? So in my book, I sort of shamelessly share that my sexuality, that I've enjoyed my sexuality, that I own it, that no one can shame me about that. I actually have a little chapter in their essay about how I actually was with Andrew Dice Clay for a night.
hey, oh.
Little Miss Muffet. Yeah. And it was when he was so young, and I just met him at the Westwood Comedy Store, and it was just this perfect one night stand. Perfect. And I had no idea who he was going to become. So years later, he was coming out of the Sunset Comedy Store with the leather and the chains and the 2 women on each arm. And I acted like I didn't want to say hi. I was just like, oh, geez, but it's all this crazy journey I went on, and I made mistakes, and then I starred in action pictures for Roger Corman. I led armies into battle, and all that. But at the end of the day, my book is about going for your dreams, shamelessly going for your dreams, and probably screwing it up. And don't expect it to work, but just go for what you love.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it is people are afraid of what's the worst. We look at what's the worst that could happen all the time, and you know what? People are afraid of if it doesn't work out, then what? If it doesn't work out, the problem is if you don't try, if you don't go for it, and you get old and you're just laying around and you say, "I wish I would have." I think that's worse than what would happen in the worst case scenario if it doesn't work out. And I think that's what people need to know about.
Yeah, in The Wrath of Blonde, I say, look, I could have failed as a jazzercise instructor at the local mall. Like whatever you choose, you might fail at. So why not choose what you love? And some of it will stick to the wall, and some of it won't. My writing has been successful. It's my 4th book. So I'm not some flyby. I'm a best-selling author. My 2nd book sold 250,000 copies. They're all humor-driven. I love my humor. I'm still doing stand-up. I still struggle. Money's a bit of a challenge, and I wake up days really anxious, and I deal with some issues like that. But maybe that's part of being an artist, or maybe we're all doing that. But I certainly didn't go the path of security and pensions and like that. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants here on the coffee with the dog, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I understand. And you know what? I'm going to talk to Eddie about that tomorrow, because security is not something comedians generally have in any respect. But when you get to be an opening warm-up guy for a late night show, that's like a 9-to-5 job. So you have the best of both worlds, but that's really rare. I mean,
Rare.
and I don't know that every comedian would want that that even because it does become a job then, and some of us are just not cut out to work 9-to-5 type job.
17 years, Eddie was the opening act on Letterman.
Right.
I mean, I go into quite a bit about my years hanging out at the Comedy Store when I did. I was there in its heyday. I asked David Letterman out on a date once, and he was so cute. And he had just started out. We were outside the store, and he's like, "Oh, well, thank you very much. And what's your name and where are you from?" It was like I was being interviewed. He says, "Oh, I've got a lovely lady waiting for me at home. So, but no thanks." But Robin Williams was coked out of his mind doing improv till 2 a.m. I was there every night watching that. And Billy Crystal was bombing in his middle of his boxing, exploration, all the boxing comedy that wasn't working. And Jay Leno was super dirty blue in the original room, and everybody it was just booming. It was just starting, right? And it was so thrilling to be there. And I'm so excited that that's a large part of my book, because it's a time in history where I'm just so blessed to have been there. and to have witnessed so much of that extraordinary talent.
Yeah.
And then being on the set of Star Trek 2 for a month and working at Paramount was a sort of a kind of a blast. And now I tour in sort of a kind of a sign autographs because I can, even though I haven't been my whole life. Trust me, I've only been doing it now because we just had the 40th anniversary of Star Trek 2, which is why I wrote the book. But it was great navigating a spaceship. I mean, who can say they, navigated a spaceship?
Well, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I've never seen a minute of any Star Trek content.
Dude, I gotta go.
I'm I'm probably the only person on planet Earth who has never seen a single minute of Star Trek stuff.
I don't really care.
I don't even have a television.
I think that's weird.
But I am, curious about the whole Hollywood experience. And tomorrow, also, Mike Binder, who did the Comedy Store thing for Showtime. It just sounds like, did he even approach you to get some of your stuff? Because it sounds like that's the stuff I would have wanted in there. That, it was all that, it was all about comedians, and I appreciate that, the comedians, little chunks of the biggest stars that were there, but there was a little bit too much of that, not enough of the real dirt of the comedy store and the experience of the lifestyle.
I wish he had approached me. I knew about this project, and I only just sort of came back from the dead after caring for my father for 5 years and wrote this book because of the anniversary, so he wouldn't have known where to find me. But yeah, I mean, I was in the back of the store, Mitzi Shore, looking like the washerwoman, in charge of everything. And my boyfriend at the time was Tyler Horn, who was a pornographic actor, wannabe comic who was best friends with Robin. So I'd hang out backstage with Robin and Howie Mandel and the whole vibe of the place. And then upstairs in the belly room was Sandra, Bernhard, and I was all just too intimidated by all of it, not trying stand up at that time at all. But yeah, I mean, I really wish there'd been some exploration of that from a sort of my perspective, because it's a crazy perspective. But the good news right now is that I have 2 film producers looking at my book for a movie.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Now, Hollywood has changed a lot. And Erica Rhodes, when she was here, she said, "I don't even know what Hollywood is anymore. It's not. It's like Hollywood is a guy in his garage with a camera and good lighting." So, I mean, the difficulty of getting a book made into a film, is it more difficult now, or is it easier but harder to get it distributed?
Well, so I guess it's some crazy statistic of needing for streaming content is up 500% or something.
Yeah.
So my other 2 books were at William Morris. Embracing Your Big Fat Ass and Owner's Manual was my 3rd book. And Breaking the Rules, which was Last Ditch Tactics for Landing the Man of Your Dreams. They both ended up at William Morris. They were both being sort of shopped for a deal. Nothing. This one, I hired a hotshot PR firm in Burbank, Anthony Mora. They made a book video out of it and sent it to everyone. And we got heard back from Tyler Measom. And yeah, cool. I don't know the stats on actually getting it done. I can only imagine it's impossible. I dare to get excited about this call, which is happening today with Tyler. And at the same time, I am a person where I make things happen, and I am committed to this working. I think it's very, very hard, according to More Communications, to get anyone to look at your book. In fact, I went to one of the Star Trek conventions, and I was in the green room with Richard Dreyfuss. Yes, and he kissed me. And Corbin Burnson, and Corbin was with his wife Amanda, and I said I had a book and I was hoping to make it a movie, and they're like, "Are you kidding me? Really? Who do you think you are?" And really, no one's going to buy your book and make it a movie. And I was like, I left there just crying. And Mark Altman, who I was on the CW network on his show, Best Movies of 1982, I think it's this week. Anyway, he did a documentary, and I came out of that, and he's like, "Don't you listen to her. You're a hustler and you make things happen." So I think if you really, really want something and you really hustle, I think anything's possible. I mean, if you look at me, I had no advantage. I've had to do everything myself. 4 books and all the success I've had. No one handed it to me. It was just pure. And I'm sure the same case with you. It's just pure dynamic desire and getting the right people around you who don't like. I've had to let go of certain friends, right? Because some people don't like it when things work, and you got to have people around you that are for you.
Right. That, there's a kind of this is one of the conversations that's coming up tomorrow about there's a you got to have a support network around you. You got to have people who support what you do, but sometimes people will support you or be overly supportive even though you're on the wrong track, and you can be walking on a railroad track and getting ready to hit by a train, and people will say, yeah, just keep doing the cheerleaders behind you're on the right path. I have some friends
Right.
who've dealt with that, so that's part of the conversation for tomorrow. I'm
Right.
interested though, are the people and the great contacts that you have met along the line, uh, are they still in your life, or I mean, to the point where they can support your this film project or or your book, or do they kind of out of sight, out of mind, and that kind of I'm in it for me, and what can you do for me in this moment, and then forget about you later on, because
Well, funny you should ask, because William Shatner just came over this morning. Hey, Bill, I'll be back in the room in a minute. He's just here now. He's just getting dressed. Actually, he's so old now. I don't know what it would be like to be with him naked. But
crazy.
actually, he was on my podcast. We've all had podcasts. I've had a few. And we did like a 35-minute interview, which was lovely, about a year and a half ago. And he's sort of the guy that got me back into the convention scene this last year. Mr. Shatner has been very generous in that way with me with the comeback of this book. Will he take me to the front line with a book about, on page 118, where I talk about the actual seduction in the hotel room, which I will not without you buying the book. Probably not. I mean, I think that the support will only go so far, but absolutely not. No one's around that's sort of, I mean, I'm thinking like Whoopi on The View. I've kept in touch with her. She had me see her one woman show in Connecticut a few years back. Yeah, I think maybe if I send her the book if I get the movie deal, clearly I think then she's going to be interested, but she might hold up my book on The View. I mean, I still have connections to Whoopi and Mr. Shatner and Bill. And other than that, all the fans within the Star Trek world, which is 40 million people other than you, thank you very much, have welcomed me back after my absence. And that's the cool thing, is that whole fandom. They're really, really cool people in that world of conventions, and family kind of oriented and sweet, and it's a great space. So I'm going to be in Raleigh making an appearance there. I've got Beam Me Up Asheville, where I'm doing some stand-up here coming up August 31st at the Mule, Devil's Foot Brewery. Oh my God, I didn't know one town could make so much beer. And then I'm in Atlanta, Monsterama. Hey, Monsterama. Of course, my second film, I was eaten by a monster, Demon of Paradise with Roger Corman. And you haven't been eaten until you've been eaten by a monster. So I mean,
yeah. Now, I wanted to talk to you about the action films, the Roger Corman stuff. I don't know. Do we call them action films? They're just, crazy, but dangerous, right? You're doing your own stunts and stuff, and put in situations of where you life-threatening stuff, or at least you could get injured.
oh my gosh. Action. I make movies only with the word action in them: action adventure, action comedy, action horror, sprayed down with fire repellent, in Star Trek and in other movies. I'm going to catch on fire. They blew things up. They teased me and taunted me, taking my life from me on a regular basis. I jumped off into holes into the ground, and I'm like, I'm done. Like, I realized what was happening was, like, I was apparently disposable in the Philippines, and they could find another tall blonde at any moment. And so kiss your sorry ass goodbye, or say, all right, guess what? Get a stunt double. So I'm 5'11", so they had to get a guy with a blonde wig to jump off the next cliff. And I've died 3 times in 3 different movies. Ran across a burning bridge that was collapsing. I got sucked into the ground by a team of, what do you call them, little people. More tragically, my role of the navigator of the USS Reliant with Ricardo Montalban and Khan. Great to work with Ricardo Montalban. He was just a truly amazing man, stayed in character the whole time. That role wasn't for me. I saw that in a Dramalog ad, that my type. It was literally me, my measurements, my height, my hair color. And I went into central casting and they said, yes, go to Paramount. And I went there and I got it only because one woman went home for Christmas and didn't want the part and they already had the costumes. And that was Lana Clarkson. Do you know who Lana
Oh,
Clarkson is?
yeah. Holy crap! She didn't want the part. I
Well,
can't
she
imagine.
wanted to go home for Christmas. She had no idea, I don't think, the magnitude, because at that point, Star Trek 1 had failed. There was no Star Trek Enterprise Corporation. It was just this. But for listeners and viewers who don't know, of course, Lana Clarkson was the lady who was killed by Phil Spector.
Right. Yeah.
And
So,
Hollywood will take you in and spit you out and chew you out. And it almost did me. And in my book, I go into that I looked at stripping, that I looked at prostitution, because it is a bit of a desperate scene out there without money and without connections. Fortunately, I didn't make any of the wrong choices, but I don't recommend women go to Hollywood now, faint of heart, have a pit bull, have somebody, because now there's human trafficking going on. It's gotten even worse.
a good segue, because I wanted to ask you about it. And by the way, laurabanks.com is the website here. On the bottom of one of these pages, maybe it's the main page here I'm on, it says Hollywood needs our help to stop human trafficking. As you must be aware, Mel Gibson just came out with this film, The Sound of Freedom. And I think the claim is that there's organized sex trafficking and pedophilia in Hollywood. And I'm just like, organized. Every time I hear organized or this idea of like organized crime, to me, it's always been very disorganized. And that's where I have a background in that. But the idea that Hollywood is somehow conspiratorial in this, I don't doubt that there's a lot of it going on, but it's not like an organized thing, is it? Or you would know better than me. That's the question. Is it?
Actually, you would know better than me. I have been told in the process of interviews with this book and coming out about how close I got to the wrong side of the tracks, that this was going on now. So unfortunately, I don't know. I can tell you that, well, a lot of beautiful women from Kansas that come there like me, they were naive, not only beautiful, but that they're naive. You don't know, you want to be a star. And there's a lot of people promising you things that don't work out. I make the joke in my book, because, humor, you can tell the great truths, which is, I would have slept with people. I just didn't know who to sleep with. I mean, are you the person? Are you going to really do, like, is there a Post-it on your forehead? Like, where's the manual a woman can read and go, if you sleep with these people, then it'll actually work. But short of a manual about who to sleep with, and that's a funny book, right? Maybe we should write the book, like, who to sleep with in Hollywood for the right. Let's just be open about it, And so I didn't sleep around. I didn't go to a lot of the Hollywood parties. That's where I think they slip you these roofies, and I mean, human trafficking is maybe disorganized, and it's just horrible anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's horrible. I can't imagine people who do that actually having like a meet. We're all going to get together and have a meeting about how we're, the rules and of the sex trafficking organization. I just don't see that as a positive, because in any case like that, nobody keeps secrets. I mean,
the big problem is women who go there who don't have money. So I say in my book, I say now, get a backup profession, get something that, like, I had the cocktail waitress, and that the story I tell is David Wilder. Ooh, I haven't mentioned his name before. I'm supposed to remain anonymous. Anyway, this agent that I had, who also represented Lana, he sent me to get a boob job, and I went to the plastic surgeon, and I revealed myself. And he said, I wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. Get out of here. But Lana Clarkson has certainly got the breast job, and she was in 17 B films, and I was in 3. And in my mind, that's staying a little too late at the party. Right. I think there's a lot of elements that are obvious you don't want to get involved in when it comes to what Hollywood wants to offer you. But this agent got me a gig as a cocktail waitress on Sunset Boulevard, and I would serve drinks to Arabs in heels until like 2 a.m. Well, I wore the heels, not the Arabs, but it was like great money. But then I got fired. And this is in my book. I got fired. And then the next thing, I get a phone call, and it's a friggin' pimp. And he's like, well, you want to come do this? And I went. I'm a bit of a Gloria Steinem who went undercover with the bunny, outfit in the Playboy scene, which she did. And I'm curious. My journalistic mind, I'm curious. And so I met with this pimp, and he was right out of Pulp Fiction with the fur and I thought he was a jeweler with all the jewelry. And he told me to go sit in the lobby of the local hotel, and I did. And I sat there and I went and I started to just freak out, and I was petrified, and I ran out of there for my life. But the point is that this friggin' agent got me this job to get me fired, to have the pimp call me.
Wow.
I mean, that's how insidious it is.
That's pretty conniving. You have to have a really evil kind of mind to kind of come up with that.
Yeah.
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 So I'm looking at your tour page now. Are you doing book signings, or is this all comedy club type appearances?
I wish it was comedy club type appearances. I'm resurrecting my stand up. I'm working on my act and taking it on the road. Mostly what you're looking at there is the Galaxy Con, which is this phenomena that goes all over the country, these conventions. Right. And I sit at a lovely little table, and I say hello to people, and I sign my book, and I sign autographs, and I get my picture taken with people. And I am going to be making some appearances at a couple of local comedy clubs in the area, but I don't have anything to give out now. But August 31st, I'm here in Asheville at Beam Me Up Asheville at the Mule. I am be doing stand up. I am be doing stand up there, and and then Beer City Comic Con. I mean, you name the Comic Con, I'm at the Comic Con. And I'm in Las Vegas with Mr. Shatner in August, and yeah.
I know we talked about Shatner a lot here. I just because I was remembering again. I knew who Captain Kirk was, and I knew him as that, and I've seen like snippets of all that stuff. But the thing that, and there's so much body of work that he has that I'm familiar with outside of Star Trek. But the thing that I remember, and I'm wondering if this was around the time that you were involved with him, he did a softcore porn film with Angie Dickinson. I was talking about this yesterday, called Big Bad Mama, like 1979. Do you remember?
Oh, absolutely. That was Roger Corman. He was discovered by Corman as well, as well as Coppola, Ron Howard, James Cameron. I mean, everybody broke their what is that expression? Their teeth, cut their whatever with Corman, and that was a really sleazy film. I mean, Corman is kind of, it's all kind of creepy. Wheels of Fire, the first film I'm in, is probably one of the worst films ever made. Thank you very much. And they tie a Playboy bunny to a car, and they gangbanged her. So, but I like Disney. Yeah, my role was great. I was the Sigourney Weaver leading armies into battle, and I had a contract where nobody could touch my nipple. I actually had the word nipple in my contract.
Wow, that's got to be unusual.
Yeah.
No, I just a little bit more, and I'll let you go. I'm really grateful to have you here today, and I hope you do well with the book, and we'll do our best to help you promote it. Part of this whole conversation here, stardom. What it and comedy. I'm more interested in comedy than in movie actors. But your take on the state of comedy today? Do you follow what's going on in the world of stand-up comedy? I mean, first of all, that everybody and his brother is a stand-up comic now, but there's people who are couple of things. Joke theft is a major issue among the comedy world, and cancel culture, quote unquote, cancel culture is a major issue that people talk about and they complain about all the time, that I'm being censored. Do you have any takes on the state of comedy today?
I think it sucks that we can't just rudely disappoint and insult people like we used to be able to. I think it's now done passive aggressively behind our backs amongst friends, like we do it anyway. I mean, George Carlin was, I think he'd be censored now in so many ways, right? I certainly hope that it's just a swing of a pendulum. I believe it probably is a swing of a pendulum. I'm thrilled now where it's just a given that women are in comedy. I adore Amy Schumer's new show on Netflix, and she's not necessarily listening to the idea that you have to play within the lines. And I just was blown away when she basically said, "I hate my mother-in-law and I hope she die." I mean, and she's hiding behind a chair, while she's telling the joke. And she's like, "Well, I figure the people that I'm going to insult when I say that joke really aren't going to hurt me," a bunch of mother-in-laws. I was always observational in my humor and a little bit of self-deprecating, but I think comedy is the one thing that will just friggin' tell the truth in ways that nobody else can, and that there should be no censorship involved.
Yeah. No,
Because even if someone comes out and they're against people and they don't like this race or that, then we all publicly talk about it and we figure it out, and then they raise that point and then we're dealing with that. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I agree with you. I'm totally against censorship, but my take is a little different. I think censorship can only happen if the government gets involved. You mentioned Colin. Colin got arrested.
Right.
That stuff is over the line. But I think, being a comedian, you've gotten a red light. If somebody gives you the light and says, your time's up on stage, that's not censorship. That's saying, your time's up, get off my stage. And I think that's what a lot of these online platforms are doing, is I don't like, or either I don't like where your act is going right now, or your time's up, or whatever. You're breaking the rules that you signed to be on my platform. Get off my stage is what it is. It's not really censorship. Because it's happened to me, and I don't complain about it because I know that I did sign a thing that's to get my channel to play by their rules. And if they don't like what I say, they have the right to kick me out. I can't go into a comedy club and just insist on stage time without permission to have stage time, and playing by the club's rules. And YouTube is a club, and Rumble is a club. By the way, we're on Rumble for the first time ever this morning, streaming live.
Cool.
But so, that's my take on it. And I know a lot of people don't agree. They think because it's a public platform where, everybody is on it, that it should be like a utility at that point and becomes public property. I don't know where you draw that line, but.
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the entire planet of people, most people are suppressed, expressively in general. I've lived my life all to the end of self-expression, saying what I need to say at the stake of losing friends, not working out on that. My book, Embracing Your Big Fat Ass, that was in 2008. That word stopped us from getting on Good Morning America. Lots of feedback. We can't talk about the word ass in it. I mean, Kevin Smith then talked about it in his book. Like, I put the word ass in my book. He had the same problem. And now you can put the word F-U-C-K with the asterisks on there now. But it's all a matter of like, all of that. But most people, I think, are find it difficult just to say how they really feel in life. Right. I mean, the comics are like, we're a little over here, like they love us because we're who there can't be. Like, I can't tell the truth to my wife, and I can't tell the truth that my boss sucks, and I can't. So I go to a comedy show and they're like talking about all that. And I think hopefully people, if there are a lot of people wanting to do comedy, that's great, because I think we're really in a culture now, and maybe have been forever, and like not a culture now, but like forever, where we're all afraid to speak our mind.
Yeah.
And we're all going to say bad things about somebody behind their back, but we won't deal with it with them. And we're all passive aggressive, and we're all got heartburn because we're not able to just say what needs to be said. And then some of us can say it creatively and make a little money and have a little relief that way. And most people can't do any of that.
Right.
So there's, I love that I go to some of these open mics here in Asheville. Asheville is a booming comedy town. Who knew?
Yeah.
You can do comedy 5 nights a week here. And it's a lot of crazy people getting up to do stand-up who, like one guy was super drunk, and obviously this looks like therapy, and they're horrible and bad. And yet I'm still like, good for them. I think stand-up comedy should be like a class in high school or college or something. Like,
I think it is. I think there's plenty of it now, and there's more and more schools that are doing it. I know UCLA has you can get a certificate, you can get a diploma, a degree in comedy. Now, so that's
I mean, and in The Wrath of Blonde, I talk about how I didn't take the route of children and marriage, and my mother just said don't, which is kind of odd. But my mom, she wanted a more glamorous life than she had. And well, I'm not sure what point I was making with that, but I'm really glad that I've had a chance to live a life of adventure in spite of the fact that it's still scary and I don't know where this is all ending. But if you really want to have a life that gets you out of bed in the morning, like what's your purpose? Like what turns you on? And fortunately for comics, what turns us on are words and putting them together and finding where the humor is. And then the humor is the release. It's the ultimate healing. It's like, oh my God, we're laughing at this situation. We're not going to be miserable about it. And so, it's really just a journey of understanding that if we don't laugh, we want to die.
Right. And I appreciate that. And I love your attitude about that. And you know what? That leads into the last question that I have for you is really, this is a memoir. Um, I always feel like when is it too early? When is it too late to write a memoir? Because I feel like you're kind of still too young to write a memoir. You're still going through, and now you could have a film made and beyond about your book, which is a whole different journey part of it. Is there any kind of too young to write the memoir type of idea in your head or any of that?
Well, I'm in my 60s, so
Yeah, so am
I,
I. But that
I absolutely not. I mean, I think that it's time. It's time for me to tell my story. This happened. The book just covers 1979 to 1982, 83, where all the Hollywood things were happening. And I was like Mrs. Maisel in Hollywood, really, where, I mean, and I love Mrs. Maisel because everything went wrong for her throughout most of the program until the very end. And I love that they showed that underbelly for the most part. I don't think it's ever too soon if you can tell something comedically, because I think to have to read a memoir that isn't funny would be cruel.
right.
So if you can wordplay and make it fun, and I'm being told that the book is really funny, thank God. I never got the chance to get the time as a stand-up that I would have wanted, and it was a little bit driven by the fact that I was a woman, and I'm not bitter, but it is a kind of a male world, and fortunately, I found my voice as a writer, as a comic, and it was very valuable for me to write it now. Any 10 years from now, it would be the same story from 79 to 82.
All right.
That I was an outsider in Hollywood. Like when I met Jack Nicholson and we talked, which was amazing, he told me, he goes, oh, I came to Hollywood to look at stars. I never thought I'd be one. And I was like, what's your biggest challenge as an actor in Hollywood? He goes, well, it's playing with someone in a movie which is beneath me talent-wise. Now, Jack's one of the few people that can get away with saying that. But then you find out in the book that he pursued me for a while, and I did have an encounter with him that was sexy, but I won't tell you. You have to buy the Wrath of Blonde to find out what happened with me and Jack.
Well,
Jack Nicholson, Jack.
good stuff. I appreciate it. And listen, anything I can do to help move the book, I'll be glad to do that. We feature it. We'll put it on the website, laurabanks.com, folks. Laura, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I've heard very good things about that. It's laugh out. It's a book that you will actually laugh out loud, not just like laugh to yourself reading. So wish you good success with it, and maybe we'll see it at one of these shows somewhere along the road. I'm going to Raleigh. Well, you're there next week in Raleigh. I'm going in September. Anyway, we'll follow you. It's on laurabanks.com. Maybe we'll get a chance to see you sometime. Good luck, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I had a blast talking
All right.
to you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Laura Banks, folks. Interesting story, man. God, what a life. You know what? When I say too young to write a memoir, because it's too young to tell, I think she's got, I feel old in my 60s, but I think she's got a lot of life left in her, and a lot of great experiences still to come, which is my point about maybe it's too soon to write a memoir. But if it's just about 3 or 4 years, 79 to 83, 4 years, then it is time. And so book is called The Wrath of Blonde, laurabanks.com. Check it out. I'm going to take a short break here and be back. We have a speaking of worst movies ever made, we have slightly irrelevant reviews with Donna Shannon coming up before Jason arrives with us. So let me just play this while I take a short break. I'll be right back.
Hey, yeah, mind dog, yeah, mind dog. If you ready for some action, this dog sure to keep you laughing. Let's go. Mind dog, yeah, mind dog. Don't roll, don't play fetch, only here to keep your interest. This is the show that you've been missing, full of comedians and musicians, plenty of interviews, entertaining, keep it funny, there ain't no debating. So authentic and straight raw, pushing the limits when they talk, doing it live when they stream. Mind dog TV, yeah, so crazy, getting intense. The dogs are wild, better beware before you hop over the fence. Mind dog, yeah, mind dog. If you ready for some action, this dog sure to keep you laughing. Let's go. Mind dog, hey, mind dog. Don't roll, don't play fetch, only here to keep your interest. Let's go. Come have coffee with the dog.
These Chinese ladies in Union Square Park with their hands over their heads. I guess I really wanted to show you the picture before I describe what they told me they were doing. Anyway, the conversation last night was about capitalism and the ruthless capitalism in communist states like China. And for some reason, he brought up Norway. I didn't even know Norway was a communist state. This is how uneducated I am. But these ladies in the park, standing there with their hands over their heads in a very uncomfortable. Well, if you're going to stand there for 8 hours with your hands over your head, your arms are going to get very tired. And nobody seemed curious about it all. Now, in New York City, I guess they're used to seeing stuff and nobody's asking questions about it. I get that. But I, being the country boy I am, I had to go ask. And here's the thing. And I just asked the chat room. There's not a lot of people in the chat room right now. Let me see who's there, by the way. I didn't say good morning to anybody. Ian, good morning. And Andy. And that's it. Just you two guys in the chat room. Wow. We have far more than that. And by the way, if you're watching us on Rumble today, and this is a new show for you, we won't be able to see you if you got any comments and stuff. There's no feedback on the comment stuff to what I'm seeing. So if you're leaving comments, I don't see them. Sorry about that. If you want to join us on YouTube or one of the other platforms that does feed the comments, and we'll be able to see your comments. Other than that, we do appreciate you watching. I'm not sure how long we're going to survive on Rumble. I've been censored there before, just on uploads. Censored is not the right word. I've been, I don't know, taken down, have my content taken down off the site because not far right wing enough. That's true. I mean, so we have both extremes. We have people on YouTube for getting taken down for what is perceived as not far left enough, and then we have people on Rumble, which is supposed to be about free speech. We're taking stuff down because it's not far right enough, and everything in between. But back to these ladies in Union Square Park holding their hands over their heads, and nobody really curious about it. What they are doing is protesting. What are they protesting? They're protesting, and then I looked it up at the time. This was 10 years ago now, but I couldn't believe it. It was so shocking to me. What they're protesting is the harvesting of human organs, the harvesting of human beings as a organ farm for the elite. In other words, they have people in concentration camps whose sole purpose is to stay alive and stay healthy in case a rich person needs a kidney or a lung or anything transplanted, a liver. And they will kill you to take your organs out for rich people. There is a actual concentration camp where they just grow people like a farm for the benefit of the elite. Sounds shocking. It sounds like some science fiction horror movie from the future. As far as 10 years ago, I validated all the stuff and did a lot of homework on it. And my brain cells are so foggy now that I can't remember the name of the actual organization that they were protesting, but it's a true thing. And it came to mind last night while we were talking about, because he was talking about the dangers of capitalism. I was like, you think communism is any better? And that's when he chimed in that um, communism is really state-sponsored capitalism, where only a few of the people are capitalists and the other people are just slaves to capitalism. So when he's talking about, the modality, there is no true communism on Marxist idealistic communism where everybody shares everything, even in the most communist states. Anyway, Donna Shannon, speaking of reviews and the worst movies in the, ever made, Donna Shannon is here with her third um, episode of slightly irrelevant reviews. She's going to be reviewing a movie called Maximum Overdrive that was written and directed by Stephen King. She's here now to talk about that. And I will take a break and get some fresh coffee while you watch this.
Hey everybody, it's Donna Shannon with another slightly irrelevant review. And today I want to talk to you about an instant classic that came out in 1986 featuring the amazing soundtrack by AC/DC. Of course, if you've never seen this movie, you've absolutely got to at least see it once because you will not believe it when you see it. I'm talking about, of course, Maximum Overdrive. Directed by Stephen King, based on one of his short stories and starring Emilio Estevez. By the way, they both won Razzies for their work on this grand film. Yeah, it's pretty much an epically bad movie. But when we're talking about cheesy movies from the 80s where the soundtrack is actually a bigger star than any human in the movie, of course, number one is got to be Flash Gordon, with a soundtrack done by Queen, followed instantly by Maximum Overdrive with all the music done by AC/DC. Yay! At least there's one good thing about this movie. Oh my god, it is so incredibly cheesy. But if you've ever gotten stoned in your life, I'm not telling you to go do drugs. However, the movie does have more merits when you're on drugs. And just to give you a frame of reference, I've been watching this thing constantly. Not lately. I've been sober for 23 years now, but way, 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 way back in the 80s, we had these things called VCRs. And what we did was you would pay for your premium cable channels and you would go and record a few movies and then just watch them over and over and over again because, of course, we were teenage parents and we only had HBO for so long, and then we had to cancel it and just watch the same movies over and over again. But when you're super, super high, it doesn't really matter because it's still as enjoyable to watch somebody get killed by a watermelon on one of those raising bridge things on the 100th time you've seen it when you're stoned, as well as the first time you've seen it when you're stoned. And yes, people do get killed by watermelons. They get killed by soda machines. And you're like, what? All right. So if you don't know the plot from Maximum Overdrive, the whole premise is that the Earth goes through this weird comet tail and all the machines become sentient and self-driven. So it's kind of like those Google cars that we're all fearing now, except, yes, all the trucks, all the cars, all the lawnmowers, all the soda machines, and everything else decides that humanity sucks and they're going to kill them all and take over. But there is some awesome quotes in here that just truly stand the test of time. Like very early in the movie, Stephen King himself is trying to get cash out of the ATM, and the ATM is doing its rebellion. So it just says, "You are an asshole" on the screen. And you got Stephen King staring into the camera going, "Honey, this machine just called me an asshole." And then it just says it over and over again, "You're an asshole, you're an asshole, you're an asshole." So just, as you can tell, the writing on this thing is par excellence. You can't get above that, at least for a stoner. There's also another awesome scene where I don't ask me to name actors or character names. You probably have already figured out by now. I don't do names and can't retain anything. But newlyweds driving around in their shitty car, and they end up at the truck stop. So that's the main place, is this truck stop where all the trucks have got everybody pinned inside, and eventually they turn the humans into the slaves because they all have to get their gas, right? These are not electric vehicles, they're not solar powered, they're normal gas engines. So especially all the semis, and the big bad of the semis is one that has the Green Goblin's face on it. It's pretty cool. It is. If I ever see a truck like that in life, I'm going to get my picture taken with it, I swear. So anyways, they make the people come out and give them gas, otherwise they're going to just drive in there and squish them. So the newlyweds, the new wife, goes to her husband and it's like, don't you make me a widow on my wedding day. Yeah, just epic, epic writing, I am sure. And here's the other thing too, why you must watch this show when it's on drugs is because this was definitely during Stephen King's cocaine period. I never watched it on cocaine. I wasn't into cocaine at the time that I was watching this movie over and over again. But definitely, it's a stoner movie. It definitely deserved all the Razzies that it got. But still, the soundtrack is pretty awesome. And the way they've got things synced up, it's pretty cool. So if you're into bad movies and you haven't seen this one yet, dear God, go find it on your streaming services. Watch Maximum Overdrive. Get your kush, your brownies, whatever it's going to take to put you in that right 80s frame of mind and have yourself a good old time. Once again, this is Donna Shannon with Slightly Irrelevant Reviews. If you like this and you want more of it, check out my podcast, which is Donna Shannon's Coyote Tales. And see you later.
Wow. First of all, I never knew that Stephen King had coked up days. I need to find out a little bit more about this. Stephen King was a cokehead? I don't know if that's an allegation or just an assumption. Dying from a watermelon, getting hit with a watermelon seems unlikely. But it sounds like the kind of flick I would like to get really stoned and watch, you know? And again, I think, I don't watch a lot of movies. I'm not very culturally hip, but I have my favorites, and most of my favorite bad movie, which I think is a good movie, is Ford Fairlane, Rock and Roll Detective, Andrew Dice Clay. I've talked about that a lot. A couple of the film review guys, Adam Lippy, who used to do film reviews on the evening show, who was a director and former film critic writer, he used to get really pissed at me saying Ford Fairlane, to me, top-notch comedy. One of my favorite comedy movies of all time. Now, I know people will disagree. It's all subjective, but I can't find that dopey picture of that woman, of those women, the Chinese ladies in Union Square Park. I guess it's a moot point now. Just just fascinating. Facebook makes it hard to go back and see your memories from yesterday. Could have sworn I grabbed the picture anyway. Jason Rowland is expected here in the next few minutes. Jason is from. He has his own thing, Comedy Feedback, and former general manager of a comedy club in Vancouver, BC. Currently working with the World Series of Comedy, and they're currently in Boston, Massachusetts on that leg of it. First night was last night. They have not updated the website to see who advanced yet from last night. Or did they? As of this morning, they didn't know. They still have last night's lineup up, but they didn't announce who actually advanced. We know our buddy Robert Taylor was not selected to even perform this time, and that's depressing. Anyway, we'll talk to Jason about the state of comedy and basically how they select these people, what the criteria for get and the best way to get booked and all that kind of stuff in a few moments when he's here. Uh, Again tomorrow, and it's interesting that she brought up she knows Eddie Brill very well from the Comedy Store. She didn't seem to know or have anything to say about Binder, except that she knew that project was going to be happening, the Comedy Store project, and would have loved to have been part of it. And that's part of my critique about when the Showtime Comedy Store um, special series, whatever you want to call that, came out. I know lots of people, not lots of people. I know several people who have stories of the Comedy Store and were intricately involved in the heyday of the Comedy Store that were never even talked to uh, before the production began on the Comedy Store series. And I think that's a shame. You got to talk to the people who were there, and know, even if you were there. And I don't think Binder was there in the 70s. I think he was there more. I think he's around my age, so he was there somewhere late 80s, early 90s. Not the heyday, not the day when like people like Jeff Altman, who's been on this program a couple of times, who was a mainstay and one of the biggest stars there, wasn't even talked to. Joey Gaynor, who is the opening act for Richard Pryor, and toured with Richard and one of Richard's best friends. And there, the night they filmed the Sunset Strip special, no talking to him. I mean, this is a guy who basically lived at the Comedy Store. And I don't know if Eddie Brill was even talked to either. Eddie Brill lived behind the Comedy, literally lived right behind the Comedy Store in Errol Flynn's house, and basically, lived at the Comedy Store as a comedian. For not to talk to these people at all or get their input, it seems, I don't know, dismissive, lazy. I'm gonna call him Mike Binder lazy. What have I done with my shitty little life? uh, not because of laziness, though. I have been very aggressive. I just suck at a lot of shit. Don't have a whole lot of talent, but and nothing to really boast about. But I would, all that. Anyway, be very interested to talk to Mike Binder tomorrow morning, and then to follow up with Eddie Brill. Again, if you don't know about what we got going on here, Sticks and Stones just opened up. We had the grand opening last weekend, a week, not the one that just passed, the week before that. And it's a new comedy club from Abby Russell. I'm sorry, Abby. I didn't mean to call you Amy. Abby Russell, who was instrumental in the Hamptons Comedy Festival. It's her club, and she's got some great things going on there. Eddie Pepitone and JT Habersat will be there next week, but Eddie Brill, in 2 weeks actually. Eddie Brill will be there this week coming up. I will be at that show. Eddie Brill will be here tomorrow to talk about that. But right now, Jason Rowland, who is the former general manager of the Comedy Mix in Vancouver, British Columbia. He is for over a decade of experience in the comedy community. Is now associated with the World Series of Comedy. He's up in Boston, where last night they had the wild card round, which has not been updated yet on their website. We don't know who advanced, but we'll talk to him about the state of comedy, how to get booked in all this stuff, and where his expertise in comedy feedback can help a lot of people. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jason Rowland from the comedyfeedback.com. Jason, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Now, Boston, last night you kicked it off in Boston. I don't know. I'm going to say this, and somebody can argue with me and hate me for saying it. I think the epicenter of comedy, where all the best comics in the entire universe have some kind of Boston. Boston, Massachusetts. How'd it go last night?
It was a lot of fun. It's a really great club up here at Laugh Boston. It's really well run, great room. They get great headliners coming through, and we're really proud to be associated with them. Our festival tours all around the country, and this is absolutely one of the best stops that we go to.
Now, last night, what do you have? 16 people on there. You give feedback to each and every one of them after their performance. Do you do it immediately after they get off stage, or it waits till you're going to watch the whole show and then wait till the end of the night, right?
Yeah, we don't do it like a Kill Tony sort of thing. It's more as if we offer the opportunity for the comedians to approach us and chat about it. Our entire festival is really geared towards trying to highlight what comedians are going to expect once they get into the club scene. Most of our comedians are sort of in the 3 to 7 year range of experience, those who are just kind of getting out of their own geography and starting to tour around the country. And our festival can be a great exposure for them to go and showcase at different clubs. And so what we usually do is just kind of get together for a meal afterwards and very casually talk about what happened on stage, what happened during the show. And part of what I do, especially with comedy feedback, is just provide very small corrective measures. I'm not telling you to change your material. There's a different way that you might be able to highlight who you are as a comic that might be slightly more digestible to a booker. And as a former booker myself, comedians don't have a lot of exposure to hearing what goes on behind the curtain and what some of the thought is behind what can help separate you from other comedians in terms of being booked. And that's sort of the basis of where my feedback comes from.
That's interesting because 2 years ago today I had Kristen Becker on, and she's a comedian who was a former general manager at a comedy club in Buffalo. So she had that experience. Did you ever have any desire to actually get up on stage and do stand up yourself?
That's a really interesting question. I moved from Edmonton, where I went to high school and university in Alberta in Canada, to Vancouver, which is sort of the nickname of Vancouver in terms of the arts community is Hollywood North. We have a lot of productions there. We do a lot of television, radio, movies, that sort of thing. And I did have some interest in stand-up comedy. My uncle, really cool uncle, bought me Class Clown when I was 12. He was like, look, you're mature enough to not go and say these 7 words at school, but you're also smart enough to be able to listen to this and understand how subversive Carlin is and how funny he is. And that was my introduction to comedy. And so I went to a mic one day, it got canceled. I went to a mic about two months later, it got canceled. And then I went to a mic about a month after that, and it got canceled. I'm like, holy smokes, is the universe pushing me in a different direction right now?
You know, my experience wasn't that, but I did feel I had that same, like, the universe is telling me don't do this. Early on when I was doing stand up, I was also a professional musician at the time, and in order to do gigs, I would have to take off a night of music where I was already losing $250, which was standard pay for what I was getting club work at that time. So I'm losing $250 to go for 3 minutes of time, and I had to bring 5 people with me, and those 5 people I'd have to buy dinner or drinks at least for. So it was costing me a lot. It was a $500 investment for 3 minutes of stage time, and 2 of those times I completely bombed. And I was like, you know what? This is a tougher road. I just stick with music.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, comedy is littered with stories like that. We had someone drive in. The person who finished third last night drove 21 hours.
Wow.
To get to Boston, and he's right on the precipice of going and working at a lot of places around the country. So he's trying to get out there and get the live audition, the live showcase, because that's the most effective way to get booked. And so he already had something booked for tonight. So even though he advanced, he was like, thank you, I'd rather take the opportunity to showcase with you, knowing that if I didn't advance, I still had something lined up afterwards. And so I was just chatting with him after the show, and he was about to leave, and I said, well, another long ride, safe journey to you. Did you talk to the general manager yet? And he's like, no. I was like, that's the whole point of you coming here. So I stopped him in his tracks, pushed him in the direction of Joanna. I said, just go chat with her for a couple minutes. That's really what you're doing. You have to do the audition first, so then you kind of get passed from the level of talent. But then there's another secondary, as you know, secondary element to comedy, and that's really about the hustle. And that's
Right.
about doing the business side. And our festival tries to combine the two. And my comedyfeedback.com tries to do the same thing. It's like,
Right.
okay, here's the elements you need to know to get booked.
That's absolutely, and a lot of people think just being funny
Mm.
is just enough, and I don't care how talented you are, and this has been a recurring theme. Talent is not enough. I know that's a John Maxwell book title, and I don't want to go down there, but it's not enough. It's only a small portion. It's like inspiration, or I forget the Einstein quote, but inspiration is perspiration or whatever it is.
Right,
It's a lot of bullshit work that you don't want to do. That when you're thinking about, if you have dreams of being a comedian, the last thing you're thinking about is being in the business of comedy.
Absolutely.
But that's the reality. And so, but you're talking about people who canceled out and they get involved in something like this and then another opportunity, but that seemed like, oh man, why would you even sign up for something that you're not going to be able to finish up? But it's created some opportunities. Robert Taylor, who's a kind of a consistent contributor to this program, I know he's gotten some opportunities, and he had said some really great things about you, about the feedback you gave him and how it helped him improve just by little tips you gave him about, I guess, adding a tagline or context to some of his jokes. How do you approach that? I mean, are you sitting there as they're doing their act and you're taking notes and saying this line could be better and all that stuff? And how hard is that?
Well, I have like what some of the comics call like a little Bible. As I'm watching, I'm literally just taking notes, writing down while I'm paying attention and listening to their stuff. And again, it's coming. I did the math. I think I've seen 15,000 sets in the last decade, and so that helps you really calibrate what can be considered something like, oh, this is far more leaning towards the scale of someone who could be bookable, and this is far more leaning towards the scale of someone who has really good joke writing but isn't presenting themselves in the best light right now. And so all of my feedback comes from like, okay, if someone's a really good joke writer but not presenting themselves in the best light, how can we refine that? And I think one of the really interesting things that came out of the pandemic is so many people in the general public had so much access to comedy that they became much more knowledgeable about the actual craft of comedy. They could watch every special on Netflix or Amazon Prime or YouTube. And so they now are much smarter about joke structure and much smarter about setup, punchline, tag. And so they have that expectation getting into the crowd if they go back to see live comedy, because the people who are also coming back to live comedy are the ones who are really missing it. And so comedy clubs now around the country are just littered with these super fans who have this expectation of the style of comedy that they're about to see. And so I always talk about trying to make your set as digestible for the audience as possible. One of the challenges that most comedians have is they're so familiar with their own material, they forget that 99.9% of the people watching it are strangers. And so, specifically with Robert, what I was telling him is just give people a little bit more information about you, about your personality traits, about what drives you as a person, what informs you in your decisions, about what content you choose to share with the audience, and they'll jump on board with you. And so I kind of treat it almost like, when you have to be in high school and write an essay, and the paragraph that you had to submit, the first sentence would be about what the rest of the paragraph was about. That's what I tell comedians to do. Try and think of your first 30 seconds as the first sentence of a paragraph in an essay you had to write in school. And it's going to make it easier for the audience to follow the rest of it. And if those elements at the top are personality driven or driven about specific elements about yourself, it makes it much far easier for people to follow along while they're in the crowd.
Wow. There is, I don't even know how to phrase this correctly without pissing it, because I know I have a lot of people in the audience who are have dreams of stardom in comedy. And I think there's a fine line between being support and being honest with somebody as far as where your aspiration. And I think I know I'm stuttering here, or not. I'm kind of holding back here, half-ass delivering the question, because I think there are some people who don't realize that it isn't about it shouldn't be about stardom. It should be about your love of the craft. And there's nothing wrong with being a journeyman or even a local comedian on whatever level you end up at. But not everybody is destined to be a star. And I wonder if you ever have to have those hard kind of conversations, like, because I have recently, and it ended up really hurting somebody who I didn't mean to hurt, but I wanted to tell him, you're not ready. You're not ready for a Showtime special yet. You need to put in the work. Obviously, with the World Series of Comedy, you're vetting them. You know what you're getting before that. But with comedyfeedback.com, do you ever have to have those tough conversations? Like, you got to start at the open mic level.
Right. So that's a really interesting way to approach how you would talk to someone about comedy. I often start with goal setting and then kind of reverse engineering everything. And so, what would your goal be? Okay, let's break those down into realistic opportunities and start talking about the realism that a person like Tom Segura was not an overnight sensation. Tom Segura was grinding super hard in the clubs 10 years ago as a headliner, which means it took him 10 years to get to that. So, this overnight sensation took 20 years in the making.
Right.
And I had someone who just responded to one of my posts about comedy feedback and contacted me directly. And he goes, "Well, I just got into it a couple years ago, and I figured I'd give it 2 or 3 years, film a special, and then kind of stop." It's like, wow. So someone in that realm, I don't know if you're ever going to connect. So
Right.
I don't know if their perception and reality is ever going to align. But most people who are like truly interested in the craft and invest time in it, they start to see, just whether through osmosis or through mentorship within their own community and their own scene. It's like, oh, it takes time. It takes time. And so what we do with, especially with comedyfeedback.com, is we kind of reverse engineer, like I said. So it's like, okay, what can make you most bookable? Okay, the biggest opportunity for you to be bookable is to be memorable. And the best way to be memorable is to be personal. And the best way to be personal is to be specific about elements of your life. And I think you can agree with this. Over the course of the last 12 or 15 years in comedy, it's really gravitated towards people just talking about their life in a funny way, as opposed to sitting down in a Starbucks and writing a joke. Oh, what do you think the crowd is going to think is funny? It's more now about, here's me. Here's what's happened in my life. Let me search for the funny elements and go from there. And so a lot of what I do is, a part of my background is in management. I used to be in sports, professional sports, and was like in general managership of sporting facilities and sporting teams. And so I would often have to deal with HR issues, which means now you need to present the management sandwich. And so I take a lot of the management sandwich to comedyfeedback.com. I have to point out the really good, and then we talk about constructive elements of the challenging areas of what you might be facing in comedy, and then finish on really good again, so that people still maintain the desire and the drive. And one of the best compliments I ever had was from a comedian who was kind of struggling receiving feedback, and then said to me at the end of it, I was like, I was really hesitant asking you for feedback, but I saw how detailed you are. And then now, after talking with you, I feel like you could tell me I'm doing everything wrong, but you say it in such a nice way, I would change everything I was doing. So you kind of have to be a champion for the person you're speaking with as part of the criticism that you're providing.
Oh, I totally respect your ability to do that, because I know from even in the musician world where I have seen those kind of networking things where people are there to get constructive feedback, and still the connection of how it's delivered and how it's received doesn't click, and people get defensive then and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't work. It's an art form just to be able to give constructive feedback.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's
hats
so
off to you.
hard to, thank you. Yeah. It's so hard to maintain the thought that we're objectifying a subjective element. I
Right.
was talking with one of the comedians last night. I go, I want to start off by saying this is the first time we've met in person. So everything that I'm saying is coming from a point of like real interest in you as a comedian. I'm a fan of yours to start with. But let's talk about the micro things that you could change that might make a stranger appreciate your material better. And then I was trying to give an analogy. I go, let's say we went to the Boston Museum of Art tonight, and there's a Van Gogh there, and there's a Picasso. How do you give one 9.2 and another one 8.7? Like they're both fantastic. So how do we acknowledge that everyone is putting a lot of time and effort and is good at this craft, but then also could still have some minor areas of improvement available to them?
Love it, love it. You talked about writing, and some people can be really good writers and not great at delivering the
Yeah.
material and all that stuff. And you know, the phrase that people say is finding your voice as a comedian.
Mm,
This is something I struggle with, even as a podcaster, even as a musician, all my life. I think multiple personality disorder can keep you from
right,
finding your niche or locking in. How important is it to be a product that people know, because you want to be memorable, as you said,
right,
a product that people know what to expect. Andrew Dice Clay, you know what to expect from him. You can just picture his act in your mind. You know who he is, but I'm sure that that's not the sum total of who he is
right,
in his life. And for me, it's always been a really difficult thing. Which one of my many personalities do I want to present to the world?
right.
Because I'm do you give people that kind of
Yeah.
guidance, like finding which one you should stick with?
Right. And it's so hard because voice is sort of this overarching term that's used within comedy, but then no one really breaks that down to what does that mean and what are the components of that. And so I think, to me, there's a couple interesting points that you bring up there. One is I think a lot of comedians will start their set with a quick joke. It's a bit of an icebreaker to prove to the audience that they're funny. The challenge is if you really examine that point of view of delivering comedy, you might be doing a joke that has nothing to do stylistically or thematically with what you're about to present for the next 5, 7, 12, 25, or 45 minutes. You're just there to break the ice. Well, the challenge with that is you're not really doing that to prove to the audience that you're funny. You're doing that to prove to yourself, to prove that the audience that you're funny. So the coping mechanism is for yourself, not for the crowd. And you
Yeah,
might accidentally be confusing them. Like imagine if Stephen Wright came out and told a really long story about his life that takes 3 minutes off the top. And then you're like, oh, this is a really interesting storyteller comedian. And then the next thing you know, it's just like, boom, one liner, one liner, one liner, one liner.
right.
And you're confused. Like, how did he all of a sudden turn into a one liner comic? And so, thematically and stylistically, I think you need to stay consistent on stage. So, one of the first things I suggest to comedians is if you are using an icebreaker joke, try and get rid of it or reformat it so that it gets into some elements of personality and, like I was mentioning earlier, I term it sort of as a defining statement off the top, something that's going to give personality traits and elements, like sprinkle little hints about what you're about to discuss. So if someone came up and talked about being recently married, well, that can mean, oh, they're going to talk about the marriage, they're going to talk about dating. It opens up a lot of elements that they can discuss that thematically ties back to being recently married.
Interesting. I'm just trying to put that into some recent experiences that I've had. I was thinking about, I saw a showcase night at the Stand in New York City, and Joe List was up, and he was killing the room. I mean, so much that in one of the subtle little pauses, I almost choked to death, and he called me out on it from the
Nice.
stage. But I was laughing so hard. He was killing the room, and Josh Johnson came up after him, and he let all the laughter leave the room and got quiet, and then took a minute to really build from absolute silence. And I'm just kind of thinking about how that applies to him, because the rest of his set was not that. It wasn't this subtle build up to a story about a dentist, whatever it was. But it took a few minutes to build, and I'm like, wow, is this guy gonna suck? That was what was in the back of my head. Is it gonna suck? Or is this gonna be one of those boring guys who thinks he's being funny? And then he killed. He eventually
Right.
killed, but he started out with that really, and it kind of, it was refreshing to me. I thought very brave, because
Mm.
a guy you just killed, and you're gonna let all that laughter, because the instinct, right, is to say, I'm not gonna let this wave die. I got to jump on this wave while it's still
Right.
here, right? So that's just an interesting point.
Yeah, and then if we're tying back into sort of the idea of your voice, I think what happens is like most comedians during their journey as a comic probably when they first start writing, let's be generous and say 15% of what they write ends up on stage in a workable format. Um, and then as you evolve and you have more stage time, you get more comfortable with what jokes work for you. And that's the very genesis of finding your voice. And so what I find is that as comedians get more stage experience, as comedians understand, okay, stylistically, this is where I'm going to be. This is the type of topics I should discuss, this type of attitude I should have while discussing it. You start gearing your writing in a certain direction. And then now half of your material works on stage. And then now 75% of your material works on stage. And so that's when people, when they start to find the ability to write in the tone that they should be expressing their ideas. I often tell comedians, when you're examining a joke, don't examine it for word and this is the structure and get married to how you structure your joke. Look at your joke from the terms of intent and context. What was the thought I was trying to project to the audience? What is the concept I'm trying to make them laugh about? And it might make you completely break down and restructure the joke, but the intent and the thought is behind there. And then when the intent and the thought gets much closer to your offstage persona that you can bring onto the stage and gets much closer to fitting thematically the other elements that you're talking about in your set, that's when you're getting towards your voice. So there's no codex that you can unlock and go, oh, this is my voice, and now I'm going to write perfectly in it. What happens is that you slowly evolve to understanding what the audience reacts to you about. And then if you are perceptive enough as a performer and you have a strong enough support circle, whether mentorship or other people, other comedians or club owners, bookers, managers, that sort of thing, providing you with feedback, then you can be confident that you're taking your writing in the right direction. And then now all of a sudden, everything you're writing fits what you want to say on stage. And one of the most counterintuitive things that I say to my clients quite a bit is jokes don't matter. And comedians are like, what do you mean? It's like, all of comedy is about jokes. All of comedy is about your ability to deliver a joke that makes sense from your point of view.
Nobody buys the product; they buy the salesperson.
Yeah. And what's going to end up happening is if you have a long enough career in comedy, those jokes are going to be retired, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes I love that you bring up music and comedy because there's so many overlaps and parallels between those two universes. Sometimes comedians, as they grow as comedians and they get more time on stage, they lose track of the ability to keep the tight 5 or the tight 7 because they don't practice it enough. I often tell them, practice it. It's like going back and practicing your scales, or it's like going back and practicing the basics and the fundamentals. If you get a 12-minute spot at a bar gig, challenge yourself by coming out cold and doing your tight 5 off the top. Yeah, you're burning material that you would have said later in your set, but you're giving yourself the opportunity to duplicate what might happen in the real world, which is getting a guest spot at a club that is a de facto showcase to try and get paid work there. So keep that tool sharp. And another really interesting analogy between music and comedy is the fact that both of them have this subjective element to it that we all try and figure out a way to objectify. And as I mentioned earlier, it's so difficult to objectify such a subjective craft form.
Yeah, cool stuff. Now, you are with the World Series of Comedy, anyway, not necessarily in your regular business comedy feedback.com, but in the World Series of Comedy, you're seeing comics do the same set 4 nights in a row. Maybe adding extra minutes on as you get towards the final. Do you see people, I don't know, allowing their desire to, I'm going to back up a minute. Al Baker, who was a sleight of hand guy, he told me the difference between an amateur and a professional magician. He said an amateur needs to go to the comedy store, the magic store, and buy new tricks to do for the same people over and over again, where a professional is doing tried and true material for different audiences every night. That stuck with me, that idea of, refine your act and get good at what it is you do and do it for new audiences. Don't go to the same audience and do the same, do new material every single time. But for people just starting out, that impulse to do new material all the time, even if it's the same club and the audience might have changed, I'm sure the not just the crew from World Series of Comedy, but the audience, the general audience in the club
Yeah.
probably changes that night. Do you see any kind of I don't know, wanting to put in new material against
Right.
the club's
That's
format?
all. That's often a point of discussion in our post-show talks. You know, if we go out to eat and we chat about stuff, because those who advance, like you mentioned that you didn't get the names, but Pam, Sabrina, and Andy advanced last night. Pam McGurry, Andy Gunnan, and Sabrina Douglas. So they all advance. And so the question that they would have is like, do I repeat the same material or do I do a brand new 7 on my next show? And my response as a former club manager is I'd like to see the same material resonate as well in front of a fresh audience, because that's what you're going to be duplicating in a club setting. So if you get booked at Laugh Boston next year and you're performing in front of 5 different crowds, Joanne, the general manager, is going to want to see all different 5 crowds who are going to be completely different demographics, completely different makeup of people. That you're going to have different laugh captains in the audience. You know, they want to see that same material resonate strongly in front of 5 random crowds. And so that's an element where I always suggest just do what brought you here. Like dance with the girl that brung you.
Yeah.
Another analogy to music is like play Freebird, man. Like so much. You got booked because you play Freebird, so play Freebird. I saw this really
Play the
great.
hits.
Yeah, I was watching an episode of Professor Rock on YouTube the other day, and they had the guy from Extreme, and he came here to Boston, which I think is their hometown, and they didn't play more than words. And Steve Tyler was in the crowd, and Steve Tyler like angrily went backstage at the end of the concert and goes, "Play the effing song."
Yeah.
You know, it's what got you booked. Play the effing song. And so I'm the same way. Like if someone sends in a submission video to me, that's how I'm evaluating you as a comedian. So let's say I'm booking a club and you come out and you don't perform anything from that submission video. It's like, why wouldn't you do that? Like it was what got you in the door. And so as we alluded to much earlier in our conversation, comedy becomes less about proving that you're talented, because at some point there's just this baseline where there's acceptance that you are talented. Then it becomes about what's me selling the product of this talent. The byproduct of my talent is the product of stand-up comedy, and how do I sell that? And it becomes, I ran into one of our former winners, Jason Cheney, just out of the blue in Las Vegas one day. And I started chatting with him. We went for a beer. I go, man, how's it been on the road? He goes, it's good, but it's a bit of a grind. I go, yeah, it's crazy. Huh? It's like 90% hustle now and 10% proving your talent. And he's like, nah, no. And I'm like, oh, really? Is it better than that? He goes, nope. It's 99.9% hustle and 0.1 people understand you're talented. And so there's different strata, as you alluded to earlier in our conversation, in terms of within the comedy community. There's the people who are still in the open mic scene. There's the people who are migrating from open mic to getting more club work. Then there's people that are getting outside of their own geography. And every time you kind of get to the next step, there's a little element of plateau. And part of what I do with comedy feedback is to try and help you break through that plateau.
All right. I want to be respectful of your time. I'm glad you came here and shared your insights with us. But I do have a couple more questions for you, if that's
For
okay.
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So in the goal is to have you and the panel of judges judging this thing, but you're human beings, and so if somebody is a hometowner and they got their fan base there, and they're making so much noise and laughing hard and being demonstrative about it, that's got to affect your perception of the act in some way. How do you guard against that being being part of your criteria that you're judging the work on?
Well, I think going back to what I said earlier today in our interview, I've seen 1,500 sets in the last decade. So there becomes a point where you're like, oh, I'm just evaluating this basically purely on its own merits. We get 700 to 1,000 submission videos a year. We commit to watching the first 5 minutes of each one of those videos. So now I'm watching 5,000 minutes of comedy. And some of it's at an open mic, some of it's in front of 12 people, some of it's at a bringer show. And you learn to separate the material and the delivery from the audience's reaction. Because let's say I'm still in Vancouver and booking the comedy mix. I have to evaluate the comedy based on how I think my market is going to react to that. So our festival is all geared towards getting everyone in Vegas in September for our year-end finale, where we declare our champion. and we bring out 50 or 60 industry from around the country. And so we always preach to the comedians, just perform your best, most well rehearsed material, because those bookers will evaluate it based on their marketplace. And so, yes, there is the human nature element of it, but also once you become what I call an experienced viewer, so a club booker, club manager, owner, that sort of thing, you sort of are able to compartmentalize the skill and the craft from the audience's reaction. It's part and parcel. I mean, the entire goal of comedy is to get the audiences to react that demonstrative to you. But when you're actually evaluating the talent, you sort of have to separate it. It's kind of like going to watch a football game or a baseball game. Like if a guy gets 3 hits, but they're all like bunt singles down the third base line versus someone who like hit 3 500-foot home runs, they both went 3 for 3, but someone went 3 for 3 in a much different capacity than the other person.
Yeah, I get it. And I just wonder if because you see somebody else who's a hometown gamer and the crowd is all for him. The other comedians now, not you guys as a judging panel, but the other comedians, that's gotta affect. And it probably shouldn't. If you're going to be a professional, you have to learn to deal with sometimes the feature will just not kill the room, and you have to go up there as the headliner and be not as funny to that crowd as
Right.
as the feature, which is kind of plays games with your head. But I would think in the competition, you see a hometowner, like somebody from Boston, let's say,
Right.
in Boston, and I'm from New York, and all of a sudden you hear the crowd just reacting to him. It's got to play with your psyche a little bit. Do you counsel people on
Right.
that?
Yeah, that's another thing that sort of pops up in our post-show meals when we go out and we eat and we chat is one of the things that we really pride ourselves with the World Series of Comedy is that we're not a bringer event. We're not about trying to highlight just filling up the room and the business side of comedy. We're trying to create a holistic approach to what your career might be should you pursue it further. And so the top 40 that are performing this week in Boston, they're not all locals. They come from all over the place. I think Pam is from Arizona, Sabrina's from just outside of Toronto, Andy's from Atlanta. And so there were Boston performers on that show last night, but they weren't amongst the group that advanced. And so one of the things that I found really funny is one of the staff members came up and she said, I was watching you during the show and you were stone-faced, but you're watching comedy, but you're stone-faced. And I was like, well, I have to be objective in this moment. And so I watch so much comedy. I internalize, I could be, oh, that's a great line. I'll write it down. I'm like, oh, that's super hilarious. Or that's a really interesting premise. Why didn't they talk more about it? So I'm so invested in their craftsmanship in that moment that it takes a lot to get me to literally laugh out loud nowadays. And so
Yeah.
I think that the ability to separate that from the response of maybe a hometown hero who brought 30 or 40 people in a 120 person crowd in terms of swaying my perception of their performance compared to maybe someone who's either newer at comedy. But you're right, like there's so much anxiety in this very ego driven world of stand-up comedy that I think people have some nerves and anxiety about that. But one of the things that people find about our festival is they quickly realize on at least second visit, and Robert can probably attest to this, is that the World Series of Comedy has kind of fostered this communal aspect. And so people start to understand the second time they go to an event, they're like, oh, I get this. This is not about a bringer thing. This is all about this festival trying to help comedians improve. And so then it opens up a lot more avenues of discussion and people being like really honest and providing solid and constructive feedback and peer review, that sort of thing. And so I think the element could be anxiety driven the first time someone participates in one of our events. But then if they see what the results are and they see how much Joe, the CEO, and myself really care about comedy, then they kind of understand where we're coming from.
All right. I have an observation. It might help some people. And I've said this before, but because we are so delicate, the artist mentality is so delicate and fragile that oftentimes people will think they're bombing when they could have an audience full of people like you who are laughing on the inside. But I've seen so much comedy. It takes a lot to get me to really like laugh hard,
Yeah.
and so keep that in mind. You're not just because you're not getting the response that you want doesn't necessarily mean you're bombing. I've had those shows where oh my God, I'm suffering up here. And then after the show, people come up and tell me how much they enjoyed it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, you didn't show
Yeah, yeah. Let your face know. But when I ran a club, we would see that a lot on Thursdays. So Thursdays I used to call it the comedy nerd crowd. So it's the people who like were hyper into comedy, and they knew that they were getting the exact same show as the Friday and Saturday, but they were getting it for $10 cheaper. So they'd come on the Thursday, and they were the type who would sit on their hands while watching, but not in agreement. Like, oh, that's hilarious, that's hilarious, and
Yeah.
then be effusive fans in the lobby afterwards. And all the comedians would be like, couldn't you have been this demonstrative inside the room? It's great
Right.
that you're like this to me outside of the room. But while I was on stage and just riddled with anxiety, if you would have laughed a couple times, that would have helped me up.
Right. Smile.
Yeah.
um, now you mentioned the submission tapes and the classic things that people get. I'm sure you have guidelines somewhere on the site that tell you the kinds of, but the people still screw up and just give you like too much time in between before they get on stage. Classic mistakes of what people do in the submission tape.
Yeah, part of the reason why I developed comedyfeedback.com is I don't think enough comedians realize that you should be filming a specific showcase set. Most of them are just sending in a 5-minute clip from a set that they did really well. Well, the thing is, like, it could be really haphazard in construction. You could be jumping from topic to topic. You may not have started at a place that gives the viewer perspective on what you're trying to talk about in that moment. And so I try and gear people, okay, if someone sends a submission tape to the World Series of Comedy and they don't get into one of our events, they're provided the opportunity to email us and ask for the 6 submission judges to provide notes back. And so our notes tend to be very consistent among the 6, but we don't see each other's notes. So if you get feedback from us from your submission video, and 4 of the 6 people bring up a certain point, that's probably something that is really being highlighted by anyone who's watching that video. I've also, with comedyfeedback.com, developed what I call the 7 deadly sins of comedy. And so there's lots of elements where like either tropes on stage that really would tie you as a performer much more closely to the open mic scene than the comedy club scene. So things like overuse of the word guys or you guys as a collective noun to bring the attention back to yourself on stage, or I know what I look like as that actual phrase, or I know what you're thinking, which is the most egregious of the sins, in my opinion, or give it up for.
I should be writing these down, but I'll take notes later.
And so things like even something as simple as I'm going to leave you on this. I think that that's something that every comedian should remove from their onstage vocabulary. And the reason being is I understand usually it's a verbal cue to let the showroom manager know that you've seen the light so that you're wrapping up. And so you're trying to communicate that to the showroom manager. So they're like, I'm respectful of your venue. I'm not going to run time. I know I've seen the light. Here's what my last thing is going to be. So that's great, you communicating to the showroom manager, but you've also just said it to the 150 people in the audience who now are like, okay, you're about to finish? Well, maybe I'll start getting ready for the next comedian. Or, okay, you're about to finish? Impress me.
Right. This
I
better
know
be good.
that this better be your best thing.
Yes.
And especially if you say, I'm going to leave you on this implies one. And say you tell one joke and it doesn't work and you have to go to the back pocket and use your saver. So now you've just accidentally deceived them because you're no longer leaving on this, you're leaving on that. But the biggest thing, and I had a very long discussion last night with a comedian about it. He wasn't egregious in this area, but just to give him some feedback as to why I find it a phrase that should not be used on stages. What you're doing is you're removing every potential element of FOMO for the audience. Like if you're telling them you're leaving, they can no longer have that moment in their seat where you finish a joke on a huge punchline and say goodnight, and everyone in the audience is like, oh, I wish they were doing more time. Now, so if you say I'm going to leave on this, you're never going to get that. And if in a showcase specifically, or a live audition, you can get the audience to go, oh, we wish we had seen more of you. That is exactly something you can go to the booker and go, did you just hear your audience say they wanted to hear more of me?
Right.
Let's get me back here. And so something as simple that a comedian doesn't even think about of saying, I'm going to leave on this, can change the entire mindset of the audience for their final 1 minute on stage, which is when they're really trying to wrap up and present themselves in their best light to the booker. So that's one of my big red flags is like, so if anyone watching today can take one element away, please try and remove that from what you say on stage, because you're accidentally, with no intent, doing yourself a disservice, because you're creating a finite end, you're removing the opportunity for FOMO, and you're also allowing the audience the opportunity to begin to check out on you.
I can't tell you how many times, because I'm just remembering in the last month how many times I've seen major headliners do that in their specials. I'm going to leave you out with this, and basically doing, and I'll be really cognizant of that from now on. The last thing before I let you go, comedyfeedback.com. That's your business now. What's the process there? People just contact you, go to the website, and like get a consultation. How does it?
There's,
Give me the flow.
there's two main avenues. So one is one-on-one consultation, where someone would submit a video clip, and based on the length of the video clip is how much I would end up charging for my consultation. And what I would do is I would review it. I'd probably watch it 3-4 times. I would take notes. I create a 25-point scoring system. So scoring you against Chris Rock or Dave Chappelle, because literally any comedy club can book any comedian they want if they have a large enough budget. So that's one of the challenges that comedians, as they get to the club stages, they still think they're competing against everyone from their scene. It's like, no, you're now competing against the Chad Danielses of the world, against the Jen Kirkmans of the world. And so I create a 25-point scoring scale that are the criteria that I, as a booker, would look for when I was trying to book someone. And so it ends up with a score out of 500. Then I give like a little summary in each of the 25 points. And then I do like a little summary of like, okay, this is the stage I think you're at. And I even have like a red light, yellow light, green light, go of like, okay, you're ready to headline independent nights, but you should only be looking for feature work at a club or hosting at a club. Then in addition to that, I do a full written report that has a timeline, and it starts with the timeline. Like, oh, at minute 37, that was your strongest joke. Try and get it earlier. Or you broke one of the cardinal sins at like 6:15, and this is the joke that you did. Here's a suggestion on, I would be tempted to try this. That's kind of my manager sandwich. I would be tempted to try this. That's like, change it, but in a polite way. And so that's one avenue to do like the full written report, and then we have a video session follow up. But the thing that we're migrating towards more with Comedy Feedback right now is full 6-week showcase prep classes.